All right. Hey, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Beyond Seven Figures podcast. So today's guest is a gentleman that I've had personal experience working with. There's so many things that I could talk about, from the services that he delivered, which is completely exceptional and unique and different in the industry itself, all the way through down to the experience of working with them. In fact, I'm going to let you in on a little secret. Their experience is called sauce. And we're going to go into what sauce means in a minute. But that sauce was so powerful that even before I saw the deliverable, I felt compelled to instantly provide them with referrals and recommendations. And that's not something that happens very frequently now. He founded this particular agency back in 2009. Since then, he's moved into the position of CEO. They've worked with some of the largest brands in the world, whether we're talking about Marketo, Netflix, Adobe, so forth. They've seen over 18 clients achieve unicorn status. They've raised billions of dollars through the association, or there was some contributing factor there. And just recently, he wrote a book called Conquer Your Rebrand. So without further ado, Bill Kenney.
Thank you for that intro. Happy to be here. Happy to talk about sauce. I'll have to stand up in a minute to go grab that bottle of sauce.
Perfect. Well, so Bill, you're the founder of FocusLab, or one of the founders.
Co-founder, yes.
Now, there's a lot of really brilliant branding agencies out there. So I don't want to discount any of the work that the other branding agencies do. Everybody has their unique advantage, and they're exceptional in so many different ways. So FocusLab originally came to me and was a client, and we did some amazing, amazing work together. But in our work together, one of the things that I said, I worked with one of Bill's co-founders, Will, and I said to Will, I said, why don't you sell me? Because I'd really like to hear your sales pitch. Why don't you sell me so that I could see different ways in which we can improve? And when he sold me, I recognized that the way that they approached branding was far differently than anything that I had seen or heard of in the past. And at the end of his mock sales pitch, I said, hey, Will, sold. And he laughed. And he goes, so you like it? And I go, no, I actually am serious. Sold. And he goes, I am so confused. Where are we going with this? And I'm like, Will, take my money. I don't know how else to be more clear. And he goes, so wait, you like it? And I'm like, yes, take my money. And here's the big difference that I found. A lot of branding agencies, so it depends on what it is that you're looking for. I want to make sure that that's crystal clear.
Sure.
But what resonated strongly with me is that you really didn't care about sort of whether or not the design was going to win any awards. And quite frankly, you didn't even really care at making it beautiful, so to speak. But what you did care about is, you said, first and foremost, I need to understand the avatar. I want to understand who is the client that you ultimately want to attract. So we could see how well does your brand align with your avatar's expectation. The other thing that we want to do is we want to take a deep look at your competitors, because we want to see how your brand stacks up against the competitors. Because right now, on the surface, as we look at your brand, you have similar colors, similar fonts, and there's something that goes on there at a subconscious level that actually makes you more similar to your competitors than you otherwise deserve to be. And it made so much sense on an intuitive level that I was like, oh man, you are so spot on. Let's do it. So let's actually, before we get into the sauce, let's talk about branding and the impact on branding. Because I think for a lot of people, branding is, hey, let's get a really cool logo. Let's talk.
Yeah. That's one piece. We have to remember that brand is not a single element, right? We don't love Disney. We don't love Disney because of their logo. I don't have any affinity with the logo, but I might love the brand. Why? Well, in Disney's case, it might be the nostalgia of the movies and watching that as a child, the first time going to the park, and the experience of how I was treated within a particular park and what that was like, the smells, the sights, the joy of a ride, etc. That is now the brand at work. Unfortunately, but understandably, everybody thinks about brand as just those early assets, right? Which would be the logo, the color palette, the type. That's a huge part of it, though. That's like the stage setting to
Yep.
say, okay, here are visual elements. The reason everybody goes there is because it's visual. It's easy to understand. It's a tangible thing. I know the thing. I know the name of it. It's hard to quantify and talk about something that can be so big, like the Disney experience that I just shared. Ultimately, whether it's a few of those elements, all of those elements, it's a game of perception. It's a game of storytelling. What story am I trying to tell? And how do I want to be perceived as a business? Brand is what affects that. It has to look the part. If I'm going to a big business meeting in the city, as much as I don't want to wear a suit and a tie or anything that has a collar for what it's worth, there's a perception play there, right? I have to at least consider that. That would be my personal brand. Or I say I'm against that. This is me as a creative. I'm more of a t-shirt guy. And what story does that tell? Long point, short. At the end of the day, brand is just about perception and making sure that people know what in the hell do you stand for. It doesn't matter how good the product and the offering is. So that's where I actually did get on my soapbox. That's really where the power of brand comes in. So people need to look beyond well, I don't need a new logo. I'm not saying you need a logo. You might need a whole new presentation. Yep. And where are you trying to go?
Well, let's talk about the impact that brand had on my business. So we did this work, I believe, in 2020, if I recall correctly. We tend to attract a lot more of the low 7, high 6-figure type of businesses. That tend to be the type of person that continued to come and expect to work with us. Now, we had traditionally and always focused in on 7, 8-figure businesses because it takes an entirely different skill set to grow a business from 7 figures to 8 figures, multiples of 8 figures, and so forth. And so that really is our niche. But we were attracting a lot more of the high 6s. The moment we redid our brand, we began attracting a lot more of the 7, 8s, and even 9-figure brands and multiple 9-figure brands. $500 million companies are now asking if it's something that we can do, because it was that perception, to your point, Bill. When you're sitting in the parking lot and you're looking at the restaurant, we always say we don't judge a book by its cover, but let's be real. We judge a book by its cover. Let's face it. Let's pretend for a minute that I'm introducing you to the #1 financial planner in the world. And I told you this is the #1 financial planner in the world. And this person shows up to your house in a Honda Corolla with rust down the bottom. No matter what I said about his credentials or her credentials, you're automatically going to have this perception that something doesn't feel right. And you're going to fight up against wanting to do business with this person. And then let's say somebody else shows up. Now, you don't know who this person's qualifications are, but she shows up in this Ghost, this several 6-figure, vehicle, brand new, shiny tires and whatnot. By default, you're automatically going to assume that the person in the Ghost is more successful and will provide better results than the person in the 1986 Honda Corolla, even though the person in the 1986 Honda Corolla has better pedigree.
That's right. Yep. So you're spot on. And we would all like to say, like, well, that's a shame. It shouldn't be that way. Maybe that person could fake it then, right? And it's like, but that's the reality of the world that we live in. So again, in that example, what if I was just a buyer? So in that example, you're saying you've already told me, right? So that's a word of mouth recommendation. That would get that fellow in that old broke down car and scrubby clothes of some way into my door. I would say, well, Charlie's not going to mislead me, so I will talk to him. But what if I'm just a buyer in the market and I'm going around looking with no word of mouth? We have to assume that the chance that we're going to go with that first example is very low, even though it might be the better product. And again, that's where brand comes in. I think many people, almost to a fault, can rely on the fact, and Charlie, I think you're a good example of this too, like your company was successful in spite of that holding it back, the brand holding it back because of you. But there has to be an unlock somewhere. Something else has to happen beyond you. The brand needs to present itself in a way that people go like, well, I'm not just going there because of Charlie. I'm going there because I think that's going to be an amazing experience, company, product, etc. So yeah, 100%. What you're saying is spot on. And that's what I really try to tell people every day. It's like, I can't wait till I don't own a business anymore and it doesn't look like I'm trying to self-serve and I could just preach the good word. I'm not going to make any money off this, but I'm telling you it's valuable. You should take it serious simply to help people.
I was out at an event with a bunch of 7-8-figure entrepreneurs out in Mexico where I also spoke. And it just so happened a number of our clients were there. And as I'm by the bar and mingling and whatnot, I hear other people talking. And as other people are talking, they're talking about being clients of Predictable Profits. They're actually almost bragging about being clients of Predictable Profits. It was an interesting moment because I'm going, what is happening? And I realized that it was their way of telling people I'm successful without having to say I'm successful, but I'm successful because I'm working with Predictable Profits.
That's right. You attach to a brand. The brand then has greater meaning, right? So yes, I'm sorry, I'm going to cut you off. That meaning doesn't come from a logo, right? To come back to the logo point. It's not that logo that we're looking at on the billboard behind you that creates that feeling. That's just a small, tiny piece of the journey. That's just the identity of the thing that they can say, I know what that means to me and I know what it has done for me. There's story baked into that I could never as a designer bring to a logo, right? And again, that's not the goal.
So let's talk about that, right? Because let's talk about the brand work and how everything's sort of tied together, right? So yes. We'll start with the logo. Now, for those of you who are not watching this on video or have not seen the Predictable Profits logo before, it just looks like some stair steps, and it's actually very simple, very plain. There's not a single person listening to this podcast right now that couldn't go on Canva and design that logo themselves.
It is literally like 30 seconds.
In 30 seconds. That's how simple it is. But I also want you to think about Amazon, Netflix. Yeah. I want you to think about Facebook, Apple. I also want you to think about those, and now Tesla. How complex are those logos? But let's forget about that. My logo is super simple. My initial gut response when they first showed it to me was, I could have built this in 30 seconds on Canva. Like, I don't understand. But what I have learned, especially being a coach myself, is when you find people who are experts, to trust the experts and then give them an opportunity to explain why the logo is so brilliant. So, Mr. Expert, explain to me explain to our audience what you explained to me on why this logo is extraordinary for Predictable Profits brands. Now, if you have another company and you're like, oh, I'm going to take Charlie's logo and I'm going to, copy it, I'll hunt you down. No, but, understand why that doesn't work for them, why it is unique to us, but also talk about like the logo and the brilliance behind the simplicity.
Yeah. Let's talk about the logo as a tool. So it is an asset and part of that greater brand effect. That logo specifically, when we're going through the exercise, it was me and Bud. Shout out to Bud Thomas. When Bud and I were working on your visual identity, we were coming from a world where I think your old logo was like an up arrow. So that up arrow, it told a very literal story, but it was basically like, it was just a hammer and all it could do was pound a nail. And that was all the tool could do. Now, not every logo has the opportunity to be more than a hammer, but yours did. So the first thing we start to do is to say, okay, what is the name? Predictable Profits. Okay. When you type out that name, it's like this wide. That is its own utility conundrum. Okay, so that'll fit at the top left of your website, but like how else am I going to fit that on things? Anywhere I put it, I need a wide and really kind of like short area. All right, let's stack the words, and it reads Predictable Profits. Geez, that even actually looks better stacked. We've solved both like a utility issue, but also visually, it's better, it reads better, it's more interesting. Okay, now we got to think about a shape, what we in our industry would call a logo mark. So as we're exploring that, it's not immediately clear what we would put to the left of that. But obviously this idea of charts and growth and stair stepping up, which is also growth, getting to a higher level, ladders, all these ideas are in our brain. All right, so we're making shapes and we're doing these things, but they don't really seem to work well to the left of it. Okay, now we're gonna have this big shape here, we're gonna have a name here, but then there's this weird offset and a visual gap. So you try to fix that. Maybe it should go to the right of the name. And then we realize it stacks right inside it. They are one and the same. Okay, now it's a multifaceted tool. Now we have to get people like you on board with that. Generally speaking, everybody wants tradition, logo left, typography to the right. Yours presented a perfect opportunity to take that. Now, going further, what it also presents as opportunity, which you have used really well, take the name out. Now you have a shape and you can put other things in it, right? And you do that really well with some of your other shirts. We don't have to plan for all those things. All we have to do is give you a tool that creates opportunity. It's not our job to unpack every magical element that could ever exist, but it is to give you things that can continue to flex. Now, if that shape is not that simple, it never flexes. We try to make it look cool. It can't do any of that now. Now its opportunity is very limited. So thankfully, you saw that, you understood it, you embraced it, and that thing can live on. It's never going to feel out of trend. It's never going to feel like it doesn't fit in the modern world because you accepted this idea that it doesn't need to be an everything tool. Even though you did end up with a little bit of like a hammer and a screwdriver and maybe a wrench, you got a little bit more out of that tool. But then we got to get way beyond that tool, right? Now, what's the messaging? What's the color palette? Okay, well, let's go for like an energetic green. That matches your energy as a founder. That's unique to you. Your energy is fantastic. How can we bring that out through color? So right now we've got this powerful green. It's got punch to it. It has energy of you. We've got this simple logo stack. We've started to now, how do we bring in typography? How do we bring in now messaging that has a little bit of flair to it? Building best-in-class business strategies. We're not going for better. We're going for best in class. That's actually part of the verbal identity, right? To be bold in those statements, but also the visual identity, which is this more of this hand-drawn thing. And that was really inspired by this idea that building a business is hard and it's very hands-on. This brand should also feel like it is hands-on. We're doing the work together. You're doing the work with your partners. So that really helped to bring some personality into it. Now we've built a brand to help make that journey so much easier. It's like a lever now that you're like, cha-chink, okay, people look at us differently. They take us serious at a different level. We've risen to the occasion. And now, final point, going really long. When you get the product to match the brand, I'm considering you and you're offering the product to match the brand. They are aligned now. Now you get a 1 + 1 = 3. It's part of the visual language.
But here's part of like how all that ties in together and why the brand has to be synonymous with all aspects. Because if there's any sort of like disconnect at a subconscious level, there's no integrity between the person, the message, the colors, the logo, then the viewer looks at it and they're a little confused. And on a subconscious level, that's when you look at something and you go, I don't know what it is, but something doesn't feel right. And that's the subconscious brain going, okay, I expected the person to look one way and the brand is looking differently. And this is that. And nothing seems to match up with my expectations. It's a little bit like off. Now, if you look at me, this is actually really brought to light by a guy named Mason Bendewald, who was a gentleman who put P90X on the map, and phenomenal, super brilliant individual. And Mason, yeah, first of all, he complimented the brand, thought the brand was great, but he also said, this is one of the things that he really loved is he's like, Charlie, you do not represent what I thought of when I think 7-8 figure CEOs that are working with companies, all the CEOs and whatnot, one would expect that a tie, a sport coat, the whole deal. And you show up, you got these tattoos, you show up in a t-shirt, you know, the whole deal, but it works so well.
It's your brand.
Like, my brand. He goes, it works so well. Lean into that. Don't go away. Keep leaning in because that is the brand that everything ties so well together. Like, this is awesome. And that's coming from a guy who took P90X from a highly commoditized, you know, super crazy industry and turned him into a global leader.
That's right. You said the word right, which is commoditized. How do you get out of a commodity? It's a brand. Sneakers, to a large degree, are commodity, right? They're all made out of the same materials, all leather and rubber and some cloth for shoelaces, right? Why do I pay $150 for a brand new pair of Jordans versus just going and getting some other shoe? Yeah, because I like the look of it. But I'm also buying into the brand narrative. what it stands for.
There's a reason why we're one of the most expensive business coaches in the industry. Not only does it line up with the fact that our results are very uncommon and consistent, but it also has to do with the fact that, people come to our brand and they're just expecting. They're expecting it's going to be more premium. I mean, and we work with some of the best and the brightest entrepreneurs on the planet. And that's because the brand ties in with the identity. The best only wants to work with the best of the best. They're happy to pay the premium because they know the results that are there, and everything ties in so wonderful.
Yeah, talk about conversion, right? How much harder is it for you to convert that person if the brand doesn't help do some of that lifting? And now, how much easier is it to convert that person? You got to think about how much easier it's going to make those types of things. Also, the perception play. Looks like you guys have your act together. I would love to work there. Doesn't look like you still exist in 1997. Even again, the product could be great, but like people on the outside don't know that. All these things brand can affect. I want to touch on one more point, which is the consistency play. Consistency is vital within branding because what you're saying, the subconscious starts to question, well, how come I was kind of told one story, but now I'm experiencing a different story. Maybe this person in the office looks and feels, dresses, acts a certain way, but on your website, you promote yourself as this, this, and this. It's a great example of how you do anything is how you do everything. And brand amplifies that. If you've got your act together from the presentation, you look like a great steakhouse, there's already oh, well, they must take everything else seriously if they're willing to at least take that part seriously. Now, the inverse is true. If you won't at least take that part seriously, they must not take anything else seriously. And as much as we want to think that that's not true, it's true. It's true. It's how we all shop.
Let's go to something we talked about earlier in the podcast, because I know we're getting pushed for time here. Sauce, right? I'm going to keep talking while he gets his sauce. So he tells me, right when we start working together, that one of the unique advantage points of FocusLab is their sauce. S period, A period, U period, C period, E period.
Yes, thank you.
It stands for seeking to achieve an unforgettable client experience. And walk me through what sauce means to you and your culture. And it started, by the way, from my very first experience with Will, onboarding experience, and it continued all the way through that client relationship. There was an extraordinary amount of sauce. Talk us through it.
Yeah, so I'll share the bottle in a second. So the catalyst for sauce was I was really hungry for a single word, which ended up becoming the acronym, that would allow everybody in the company, we're 25 people, to say a word and we all knew what it meant and we knew how to act on it. It's almost like an alignment, like a North Star, like a call to action. So as far as I'm concerned, the quality of the work is now table stakes for us. We've been in business 14 years. I can't just say we have great steak. It's like, yes, 4,000 other people have great steak too. We are literally going to be on that journey with you. We are going to care and help and support and guide, and we're going to care about the customer experience. We stay the whole way through. I think a lot of people could say that. We do it at a level that is really driven by the DNA of the founders and now by the team, because people that are similar to us want to work in and around us, right? So we're all kind of the same. We attract similar, they attract similar. So we lead with heart. You have to be saucy. I understand why you feel this way. We see a lot of people that feel this way. I felt this way when FocusLab got a new logo. Let me try to help. Let's talk through it. And even if you decide you don't want to go the direction I'm saying, I'm not mad at you because I understand this is a big leap for you. That's what sauce feels like. And it fits really well in we're a service business. We're here to serve people. So it's perfect for that.
Now, I know you wrote a book, Conquer Your Brand. Give us a quick 30-second briefing on the book and where we can get it.
Yes. Conquer Your Rebrand. Find it on Amazon or conqueryourrebrand.com. The book is essentially me in full transparency and vulnerability, talking about everything we do, how we do it, and why we do it. It's our exact playbook. So the first 3 chapters are really about What is brand? What's the true ROI? The foreword is written by a past client named Bob Moore. He's the CEO of Crossbeam, a very successful company. He's a non-believer turned believer and worked with us 3 times. He wrote the foreword.
Amazing.
Perfect. The last 7 chapters are the step-by-step. We do this. This is how we onboard you. This is how you build your project team on your side. This is how you go through verbal strategy, visual design. I basically walk people through. So if they decide to hire us, they know exactly what they're going to get. More information than they probably want to know, quite honestly.
Now, this is the Beyond Seven Figures podcast. What would you say your biggest, best tip is for our listeners who want to take their company beyond 7 figures?
If you went and looked at I'll just dumb it down, right? Your website, we'll say your brand, but your website in general, your visual identity and the words that you use, you need to determine one of 2 things. It's either pulling you forward or it's holding you back. And you've just got to look at that and figure that out. If you can't determine the answer immediately, that means it's holding you back. It might only be holding you back 1%, but it's holding you back. If you think that's the case, this is my cell. Hit us up. We're happy to chat, no strings attached, and give you our perspective too. It doesn't cost you anything just to chat with us.
Awesome. And if they do want to chat with you, where do we send them?
So you can find us at focuslab.agency. Again, you can find the book at conqueryourrebrand.com. And you can find me on LinkedIn. That's where I'm most active, sharing all of these types of thoughts.
Awesome. Thank you, Bill. We covered a lot here. I spoke a lot about my personal experience as it relates to brand, what it did in terms of attracting a higher value client. Branding, as we've talked about many times over, is a critical component of the subconscious element of the buying process. See, as business owners and marketers and so forth, salespeople, we spend so much time looking at the things that are more conscious, our copy, our offer, or all this other stuff. But really, decision-making happens in 2 different ways. I often liken so much of business to that of personal relationships. You just don't turn around and say, I really like this person because I thought that the way that they introduce themselves and what they do for a living and their family values were so aligned that I decided I was going to go ahead and, ask them on a date and so forth. No, actually, for most people in the dating world, you make that initial connection by that visual cue. There is something there that creates that attraction. The exact same thing happens when it comes to business. And that's why, you're going to get some people that are attracted to Apple. But then you're going to get those people that abhor the idea of Apple and they'd rather gravitate to some sort of PC. And it's much more the PC style. And that's the angle they want. Your brand is the same way. You want to attract the people that you want to completely turn off the people that you don't want. And there's all these different elements that go way beyond the logo, way beyond the color palette, way beyond the type font. And all of that starts with really going down deep, discovering that research that makes the difference, putting that together into a visual identity. So that wraps up today's episode of the Beyond 7 Figures podcast. Conquer Your Rebrand, that book, check that out. Also, FocusLab.agency. Bill is generous enough to allow or to welcome you onto a call with him and his team and just got to get a sense for your brand, the strength of the brand, and where you might be able to make it stronger and better. I would highly encourage you to take advantage of that opportunity. So again, that wraps up today's episode of the Beyond 7 Figures podcast. As a reminder, for more tips, strategies, and information, also check us out at predictableprofits.com. Again, that's predictableprofits.com. This is Charles Godet with my friend Bill Kenney, and I will see you in another episode.